Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is your brother, Asar Imhotep, with the Madhu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. I am coming to you once again with a very powerful show, and we have a very powerful guest with us who is joining us all the way from Belgium at the current moment. So we are starting a little earlier than we normally do for these interviews. And so today, this is our first of two interviews. So I will let you know who we'll be interviewing later on today here in the United States. So I want to welcome everyone who is catching us live on YouTube, of course, and those who are catching us live on Facebook. And so if you are listening live, please like the show at the bottom and share with your friends on social media. If you have Twitter, if you have Facebook or whatnot, share the show and bring your friends along for the conversation. So just doing a few last minute checks here to make sure that everything is all good. And it seems to be at the moment for our technical things. So today we have a special guest, as I mentioned before. We have Dr. Alexis Tengan, and I'll be working on my pronunciation of the last name throughout the night. And I will just read briefly his bio before I bring him on. So Dr. Tengan is an independent scholar in social and cultural anthropology and a former teacher of religious sciences. He studied at the University of Ghana in Accra, at Lumen Vita Pastoral Institute in Brussels, and at the Catholic University Leuven in Belgium. And as a teacher, he has taught for many years both in Ghana and in Damongo and at St. John's International School near Brussels. He has carried out research on farming systems throughout northern Ghana, including the relationship between art, medicine, and religion, and on the Dagara bagr secret society in Miss. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that word right, but I'm pretty sure he will correct me in a few. He is currently documenting the histories of cultural figures and collects sacred objects and artifacts to private museums in Accra. So I'd like to welcome, without further ado, Dr. Tengan. How are you today? All right, hold on 1 second. We still got you muted. If you could unmute your mic.
Yeah, yeah. It's okay. Can
All
you hear
right,
me?
all right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I can hear
fine.
you now.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks very much for having me here.
Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show
Okay.
and inform us about your work. And so, before I get into uh, my deeper questions, can you just kind of tell us about who you are, where you're from, the people who you belong to, and what inspired you to uh, go along the path that you have taken to this very moment.
Okay. As you rightly pointed out in the bio, I'm a Ghanaian.
Hmm.
I come from the border region between Ghana and Burkina Faso and then Cote d'Ivoire. So I live on the borderline, and every time we cross the border. But I currently have a Ghanaian citizenship, I mean, a passport.
Hmm.
Uh, I was born in Ghana and I studied in Ghana. And then my interest was also in religious studies, but all the time with theology or something, they always presuppose that there was a God or something, but never really find out exactly what that means. So I was teaching in Ghana religious studies for some time, and then I got into a private relationship with somebody in Belgium, and through the Catholic Church, I was given a scholarship to study at the Pastoral Institute. I did 1 year there and then I went back to Ghana, but came back. And since then, I have continued to work as a private scholar. And then I shifted to anthropology, which
Hmm.
I thought would give me the tools I wanted to look at the sort of cultural systems I was interested in. So even though I had done my master's and everything in religious studies, when I moved into graduate school, I actually combined anthropology with European history and culture. And
All righty.
yeah,
Uh,
and then ended up with an anthropology. And since then, I have been researching and working on that.
okay. Um, Let me see. We're getting feedback from the chat room, the live chat room, right?
Yes, let us see if we can, if they can hear me, we can continue.
Yeah. So someone says better, on YouTube, just still a little low. So I think we're at a good enough level.
Okay,
So we can proceed.
okay,
So uh, hold on. There we go. Alrighty. So I guess I'll just re-ask my question just
yes,
so that
yes,
those who were not able to hear you properly the first time,
okay,
they'll be able to hear you now. So my question was, to give us a little background about yourself in terms of where you're from,
yeah,
the people who you belong to,
okay,
and what was the inspiration that led you on the path to your uh the studies you've been doing, saying for the past 20 or some odd years,
yes,
uh or whatnot. So go ahead.
yes. I was born around the northwestern corner of Ghana, very close to Burkina Faso, and I belong to the Dagara group.
Hmm.
I was educated in the local school in northern Ghana, and I left also for University of Ghana. And I worked a long time in Ghana before coming to Belgium. As I said earlier, I came to Belgium through private scholarship and mainly to study religious studies, which I had been teaching before. And then after the religious studies, I went ahead to Louvain and studied anthropology because I was looking for certain tools that would enable me to look at the cultural aspect of life and the social aspect of life. And I didn't think that religion as such was giving me those tools. I
Hmm.
combined anthropology with European studies for the first 2 years. and then that gave me a wider perspective. And since then, I've been researching African cultures, especially the Dagara culture, and then also interested in collecting sacred art and ritual objects and looking at how they impact the healing systems that we are dealing with. I don't know. I think that is okay.
Indeed, indeed. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
And so a lot of us, especially here in the United States,
yeah,
are familiar with the Dagara people primarily through the works of Dr. Maladoma Some
yeah,
and Sobonfu Some.
yeah.
You familiar with their works?
To a large extent, yes, what they have put on the net, and I've read one or two books here about them. Yes, I'm familiar with what they're saying. Yes,
Yes. And I can tell kind of reading, both of your your books
yeah,
and theirs, that there's at least dialectical differences. So as you said, you're from northern Ghana
yeah,
and they're from Burkina Faso proper. So it'll be interesting to kind of compare and contrast
yeah.
um, the the stories from both perspectives concerning the Dagara people.
Actually, even though I'm from Ghana, as I said, I live on the borderline, so I've done
Yeah.
research work both in Ghana and Burkina Faso. I'm
Oh,
quite
okay.
familiar with all the villages that have been
Uh,
mentioned in those books, and I have contacts and people in those areas. I
okay.
think, as far as I'm concerned, my approach don't only differ from that of Malik Domen, but many other African scholars
Mm,
and anthropologists,
mm,
in the sense that um, I do not write for other people to understand me. I
mhm.
write so that I and my people can understand ourselves.
Ah.
So the way I write in my text, I more or less often forget that I might, other people might, who are not within the culture or
Hmm.
within the society, will find it. I take it for obvious that there are certain basic things that they should need to understand. So the problem is that I can relate with what Malidome Some are saying, especially when you consider the current social dynamics in
Mm,
Dagara land with Christianity and all those things and the
uh,
experiences that he had gone through. But I go much more back, and it is I'm interested in using the frame of mind of the Dagara people themselves. And
mm,
that's so I try to make that clear and to use a method by which they will understand.
mm,
So it is possible that many people in America will find, and not only in America, but in Europe and other places, find Malidoma Some and Co. very appealing because they they are consistent somehow with a frame of mind that we are mostly used to, especially that we have
mm.
picked up from classrooms and from lectures and from other international conferences.
Yeah.
And I am more or less, so if you look at my work, the recent work, I'm not just questioning Malik Demeson, or I don't question him at all. I rather
Yeah.
question even some of the professional anthropologists and scholars who have done the work before. And from, I do not, I mean, from African scholars as well, to say that,
Mm,
look, we should not be translating African culture into European frame of mind or Western frame of mind, but we should
mm.
write African frame of mind and African culture. I think that is why people might find my work dialectically different from not only those of Mali Darren but most of the other scholars that have written about the Dagara.
Yes. Now, for me, it's when I say dialectically different, that's because I study languages,
Yeah,
and so um, I can just tell the difference between regional pronunciations of terms and concepts.
yeah,
So that's why, like, for example, when you, when I contacted you and I asked you about the contemplate, so how he pronounces
yeah.
contemplate is, contemplate, contemplate, and
Okay.
but he doesn't break down
Yeah.
the words in his
Correct.
text. So that's one of the things I've really much appreciate about your text.
Yeah.
But in your text, you say uh canton,
Yeah.
and then you give these other variations. So canton me,
Yeah.
and then the canton blé,
Correct.
and it's spelled a little different. So when I saw it, I'm like, oh, okay, so it must be, just dialectically different. But I can the way that you explained it, I can get a deeper sense
Yeah.
of what that is and what that means. And
Yeah.
so, that's one of the reasons why I appreciate your combination of the indigenous worldview,
Yeah.
but also taking that anthropological uh, way of framing it so that we get these definitions
Yeah.
for these common things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And that's
but
what I was explaining at the
yeah,
beginning of the. You asked me about my name, and then I told you in most of the African languages, we see that because of the tonal form,
yeah,
it's not that when you say conton, it conton, it's
uh-huh,
not that it's wrong, but you
uh,
mean something different.
yeah,
Or you might mean, and if that is not what you want to say, then you should not say it. You should make sure that the reader or the one who is listening to you understand exactly what you want to say. So,
uh,
if, for example, I take the word conton, conton, there are different words. One
mm,
is linked to hunger,
mm,
see, and one is linked to deity. In fact, that is often the point because the same tone, the same word will give you the noun form and then the work that the noun does.
mm,
So, contome, if I put me, that is the work for hunger. Contome, that's the
uh-huh,
plural for the deity's conton, which is made in order to think about, or what we will say in my point of view, what would be seen as the hunger god or god of hunger, god about hunger, or thinking
mm,
about hunger. For me, because Min, which is God, or
uh,
Min in the Dagara sense, is simply, let's say, what you say, Min, that's a
uh-huh,
question you ask, how do we? And Min then becomes the God, the deity. So Min,
mm,
Konton Min, the
uh-huh,
Konton, the works about hunger, then you have a deity for that. So yes,
mm,
I can see what they're saying, but they know that, I mean, within the written text and especially the time they were writing, they could not make these differences.
uh,
And what they started off with, they have to stick to that.
I see.
Yeah,
Well, before I go to this next segment, you mentioned the word min
I mean, yeah,
as a term for God, and then you said
yeah,
in the Dagara sense.
yeah.
So, what is the Dagara sense of God? How do the people conceptualize that entity or power, so to speak?
You must realize that Dagara religion is all about the cosmos, the cosmic force, the cosmic energy. And when I say cosmos, everything that is together, that
Mm,
is both uh, what is on earth, earthly, and whatever is above and not on earth.
mm,
So that is the cosmic. And deity means that you need to know and interact with this cosmos. So you
mm,
can, whatever you do, mean whatever you do to practically to get to know the cosmos is a form, you do it in the form of deity, the form of God, the form of divinity. So,
mm,
for example, they have uh, the notion that you can look at the cosmos in two ways: what is above and what is below on Earth. So you
mm,
personify the above and you give it a particular personality using one of the forces. It could be the rain, for example.
Hmm.
So Sa, which is rain. Now, when you translate that, the metaphor for rain in in the community sense, they also use Sa, which is father.
Hmm.
So my father is called Insan, my father. Sa, rain. So in the cosmic realm, rain takes the position of father for all the celestial beings in our cosmology. And then if you then want to have a particular shrine or practical to reflect about that, you build a min or a god or a deity for rain. So you can say the rain deity, Sangmin. You
Hmm.
see what I mean? So,
Yes.
so the min here is not, it has always to go along with something else.
Hmm.
Okay, so for example, when the missionaries came recently, they found out that the people were more, I mean, what was practical was the conton or the spirits of the world, of the earth, of the cosmos. Now they wanted a name for God, one God. And then since Chief Na is the higher social being, then Nangmen becomes the supreme God that the missionaries wanted to bring about.
Hmm.
And therefore you have the most of the current scholars and uh, people, Christians, would call the Nangmen as the Dagara term for God. But
Hmm.
I say, okay, of course it's correct because but then you are specifying what kind of God you're talking about, what kind of deity you are talking about, what kind of uh, divinity, what kind of, and its personification is different, is specific. But that does not mean that is all of it. That's not the whole history. That's not the whole story. You have to go ahead then to look at other stories that are there. I hope
Hmm.
it makes sense.
It does for me. So would you say now I've in my works that I've written regarding especially my latest work
Yeah,
regarding the conceptualization of God
yeah,
in the general African sense is that God is existence itself. It is everything and all things at once.
yeah,
And we find this just everywhere I go. Like that's the way that I'm saying. So it doesn't have the same connotation
yeah,
as in the European scholarship where they're looking at this one entity over here, and then there's creation
yes,
in over here,
yeah,
and it's separate. And so I made that, and it seems as if you are reaffirming
yeah,
that among the Dagara
yeah.
people.
Of course.
Yeah.
Uh, Min is about every, yes, is about everything. And then, but in order to understand it, you cannot just, because the, if I may say this, in the as far as the European Indo-European mentality of God is concerned, it was not always so. We should know that the current religion or the current terms that we have came about more or less when religion became an ideology in order to foster a certain political mobilization of people. So when Christianity became Christendom,
Hmm.
then the term, you cannot mobilize people along many forms of deities or many divinities, or no, you have to make it a unity. And there is a
Hmm.
particular historical context in within which this notion of God into Europe, I mean the Christian notion of God, which or the Western notion of God developed. But it wasn't so. If you look carefully at the Nordic traditions, like say you go to Iceland or you go to some of the, they have, or even within the Greeks, this idea of one deity with a which refer to God, and everything else has to be, translated as a particular God. No, it did not. It wasn't the case. And that's what I have been saying, that if we want to translate African thought into Western thought, then we miss these details, these nuances, which are very necessary for us to understand what we're talking about.
Indeed. Um, uh, the book that I have of yours
Yeah,
is of life and health.
yeah,
Uh, can you tell us a bit about? And I know you've written many, books and articles and things prior to that, so we can mention those. But I'm just familiar as far as actually, tangibly having it in my hand, reading it, is of life and health, which I'm still going through as we speak. And can you just tell us a little bit about that text?
yeah. Um, the main focus of the book is to, as you say, anything that is about life certainly is also related to religion.
Hmm.
So, of life, that is the philosophical, the religious concept, and what is life about of health. So, these are the two main issues that concern, especially the traditional religion people.
Hmm.
Politics is secondary.
Hmm.
You know, politics has to come in when it is about securing life, transmitting life, and sustaining it as long as possible. And in that book, I tried to show that within the African context, I didn't also take an anthropocentric view, whereby the human being is the prime target of everything. No, the human being is an ecological system, whereby human life is just as important as the animal and plant, which are sustaining the human life, and which human life will go to sustain. So it comes to health, the relationship between these living beings, including the mineral, which are life, a good understanding of the relationship that exists between them, human, animal, plant, mineral. That is key to understanding what life threats are. Life can only threaten another life, but life is also the one that sustains life. We do not eat dead objects. We do
Hmm.
not, our bodies or our spirits or whatever we're talking about is not sustained and nourished by something that doesn't have life. Certainly, we have to kill it. But
Hmm.
even when we kill it, the life is not gone. The life, I talk about this idea of transmutation,
Hmm.
or so that healing, as I looked at in the book, is to see that in the Dagara system, there are different cults or different uh, deities which are responsible for different things. So
Hmm.
by that, through those different deities, for example, you have the ancestors, and focusing mainly on life transmission and life
Hmm.
sustenance, community building, and so on. But they can help us understand this. But when we go to nature itself, there are a lot of living things that that existed before.
Hmm.
And therefore, if it comes to how to live for long, you know,
Yeah.
these elements, these beings are of better service and knowledge we can use. So, and therefore, that's why I talk about the proto-human, the content as the proto-human being, which is more or less like before human being existed, something exists like us.
Hmm.
And to think deeply into that, we need these divinities, these practical objects to think with, not necessarily to worship.
Hmm.
So the ancestors are important for us because we think with them about life, how to sustain life, how to transmit life, how to relate in life. The
Hmm.
other calls, like the rain call, how to think about what is beyond the earth. We need that cult or divinity by itself. So these, in the book, I try to look at how these different aspects of life
Hmm.
are indeed institutionalized as religious institutions for us to use to diagnose what is happening, to find a cure,
Hmm.
and if necessary, to terminate. Because life termination on earth is not the end. I said I describe life as a cosmic property that cannot be created or destroyed. It
Hmm.
only goes through different forms of mutations, of changes. You
Hmm.
know, it is embodied in human beings just as it's embodied in animals and just as it's embodied in plants.
Hmm.
Now, you just think about it. If the
Hmm.
plants did not know how to transform the earth nutrients into vegetables and leaves and other things which we can eat, what are we going to do with the earth itself?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
see,
Hmm.
so those linkages is what I'm trying to talk about in that book, and show how each of these institutional calls are part of the healing system, and that is, and for me, that is religion.
Hmm.
As I understand you mentioned about the vital force. Yes, life is a force. It's an energy. It's something
Yeah.
that is moving and going and it cannot be destroyed.
Yes. You remind me of, I don't know, in uh your comparative research, if you have come across the late Dr. Kimbwadinde Bonseki Kia Fukiao, out of the Congo.
I have met a lot. I mean, I've read some of the Congo material, but I don't think I met him personally. No, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um, he, of course, coming from Congo
yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
the Bakongo people, he talks about, religion,
yeah,
basically,
yeah.
what they call in the Kikongo language, they
Yeah.
call kimoyo.
Kimoyo. Okay.
Kimoyo, the word for moyo is in essence, technically it's a
Yeah.
word for the heart,
Okay.
but it's a word that they use for spirit,
Yeah.
for vitality,
Yeah.
life,
Okay.
etc.
Yeah.
And he talks about how it's just as you said. Like he even has a book,
Yeah.
self-healing power and therapy,
Okay.
and how it's this, how the principal concern,
Yeah.
for the Bakongo in particular, but the Bantu in general,
Yeah.
is this principle of life, its
Yeah.
transference,
Yes.
and maintaining health in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
And so that art,
Yeah.
that religion itself is called kimoyo.
Yeah.
And but it's really just kind of the art of maintaining, obtaining, and
Yeah.
transferring
Correct.
vital power, or the life principle,
Yes. Yes.
from thing to thing. So like when I read your work, that's
Yeah.
one of the first things that I thought of. Like there's some semblance between Dagara
Yeah.
and Bakongo tradition, but that's again, that seems to be just the life, that seems to be the principal care and concern
Yeah.
in the most of the indigenous African
Correct.
uh, uh, religions, so to speak, um, there. But what I wanted to do, I jotted down
Okay.
some key words
Okay.
from what I've read thus far.
Yes.
and I'm a share my screen,
Okay.
and you know, you look at them and you can kind of give us some context
Okay.
in terms of the relationship to the Dagara people and the system in which you talk about.
That's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me share my screen real quick. Uh, we'll do that, and I'll reduce that. Um, Oop, nope. What did I do? Uh, Hold on, I did something wrong. Um, is it sharing? Hold on. For some reason, it's not showing up on my. You don't see my shared screen, do you?
No.
Hold on one sec. I may have to reduce
Okay. Now I see
some
it.
windows.
Okay.
Okay, let me come back. Okay, there we go. Um, so let me know if you see
I see. Yes, I see.
my screen. So can
Yes, yes, I can see it.
and it says interview Alexis
Okay.
Tengan.
Yes.
So this is the book that we're talking about here, of
Yeah.
life and health, the language of art and religion in an African medical system. Um, and so I just jotted down not too many, but
Yeah.
a few key words and concepts. So you mentioned that in the text we
Okay.
should look at um or we should be reminded of the relationship between houses
Yeah.
and farming
Yeah.
to the framework of Dagara thought.
Yes.
So we can, just kind of go down this list of words in red.
Yeah.
Um, and if you can just tell us a little bit about each one of those things. So you mentioned a few of these already,
Okay.
but we'll go through these one by one.
Yeah. Um, the idea of farming is also linked to social and individual migration. So it's not as if one should just stay in one place all the time throughout his life here on earth. So there is this conception that the Dagara people were not where they were today. They are today. They moved from somewhere else.
Hmm.
Even if you know they don't know where it is, they will give a mythical name, like say Tenkura, the old place, the old town, the old village where we were. So every Dagara man will tell us that your ancestors did not come out from here, or they came from this place to that place to that place. So that's one key thing in the way they organize their farming system. And therefore, but it's also to, but as a result of that, they will have, for example, several farms. The,
Hmm.
this farm that you have here, you can go there, then you have another one here. So movement is in fact an important thing. So the Yukura is always referenced, even if it is mythical, to the old house where you were before and where the ancestors that you don't have figurines to represent, they are there. So wherever you may go, you might say, "Oh, I've come back to my old house."
Hmm.
And secondly, they also have, besides the old and the new house and where they are already, they also have the notion of senior and junior, big and small. So even in their mythical thinking, for them, all the Dagara people live together in one big, big, big house. And then they started to segment, to segregate, to move from one after the other. So there is always the conception that there is a big house where everybody live together, which makes it that they are all brothers and sisters. They are
Hmm.
all of the same house because the house is the most important mobilizing factor, which you get, and therefore even the clans are divided into these type of houses for ritual purposes. So the Yipe is the big house. Yipala is the new house where you have come to build. And Yible, you can have, because it is often the case that, you know, if you are a man and you have, let's say, 4 or 5 sons, by the time the first one has married and got children, he should go and build his own house, which is called a small house. And yours is still the big house. It's also the new house. But he will come back to you for ritual purposes. He will refer to your house as the big house.
Hmm.
In fact, only the last son may stay until the father dies. You see, so this idea of migration, which people talk about as if it is just always a matter of economic, no, it's also part of a cultural pattern in Africa that people want to migrate, and even if they are migrating in short distances within the same location.
Hmm.
One of the most important rooms in the house is what they call the long common room, chara. Chara is like, say, it's an open place, but it's not that completely open in that you can put many things inside. It's also standing in opposition to the hut, the campi, which is like defining the ego of the male. The chara is a common place, and there is another one which I perhaps you have not brought, which is the korodie, like the kitchen. So the camping, the hut, and then the kitchen. The hut is for the male to do whatever he wants or he likes in his private place. The kitchen is the woman's place to do whatever they like. And you cannot, the rules are such that you cannot just enter the kitchen, for example, as a male and even take food without permission.
Hmm.
So notice the structure of the house gives you also the structure of the society. Contemplate, as I explained, is conton. Now, some people are asking me whether this has any relationship to do with the candomblé in Brazil. I have not done the scientific work to give any reasonable response. But these are the more or less what we call the nature spirit beings. Just as humans have spirit, the nature itself, the cosmos itself, that means the earth nature, the nature that we are living in here. I'm not talking about the celestial bodies that we are not aware of, but the earth nature itself has beings, has spirit. And the first spirit beings are these contome, plural, conton singular, and then contomble, the child conton. Now, it's not as if as human beings, we grow and, die and then we are born small. No, contemplate is always contemplate. That means it cannot grow and it cannot die. It cannot diminish. It cannot grow older. It is what it is. Just like the conton, the man conton is like also what it is. So you can say that these are more or less like, you would call them like archetypes of what it means to be a child in the human society, or what it means to be a man. Because when you are a man, you cannot all of a sudden become, you can grow into a child, but a child is a childhood. So like you can say childhood, manhood, and so on. Now, the unborn is a concept which I don't find that very often. I think the Yoruba also have it also,
Mm-hmm.
with this idea of the life pre-exists birth as far as the Dagara are concerned. So if you say Bill, that is before you are born, you are Bill, the unborn. When you are born, you are Bill Ble, a small unborn, and a child of the unborn. So we are all children of the unborn. Just as we have the notion of the dead, there are also the unborn. and they constitute a very important social community with us. Just they have a say in everything that we do. And seed, okay, bir. So you can see bill, bir, bibile, contemple. These are the generic seed or generic form or generic thing about life. So it's not only just plants that have the seed, but okay, we also have the human seed,
Mm.
which will grow, which is will become adult and so on. So this the br is the seed, but then it becomes br ble, this the child of the seed.
Mm.
That's a child. It regenerates on its own kind. Yes. Thing is, as you say, that is the earth. And it's seen that the earth and rain are more or less like one and the same being. One, if you, at one moment, one can become male and one can become female. But it is not always the case
Mm.
because, and that is where earthly life are basically about the relationship between these two, earth and rain. So the earth cult and the rain cult are very, very important in each Dagara house. And we have a group of people who we call we are the rain being, some children, because they are more or less going to take custody of the cult for everybody. Just as there are others who say we are the earth children, and they will take custody of the earth cult. But each and every individual can also have his or her earth cult shrine in the house.
Mm.
Then the other one, yes, Gili and Bello. These are the what I'm working on now is actually in fact to put these things because most African societies, I mean, or at least for the Dagara, it is with colonization and other things that they became aware as political entities. Most were religious communities and cultural communities.
Mm.
So this idea of, for example, if you go to the Dagara, this idea of a chief as a ruler wasn't something important. No, each house was independent of itself by itself. So the two principles by which they regulated everything were the principle of patrifiliation and matrifiliation. Patrifiliation meaning what you take from your male genitor, and patrifiliation is what you take from your matrigenitor. And these are, they form what you call social categories. So because they are also very local, that means that when a woman marries, she moves to the man's house. So the house, the house building is a patrifiliation. It's associated with a patri line. But not that everybody living in the house is of the same because you have women who are coming and they are not.
Mm.
Okay. But when you go to the economic field, for example, the market and other things that is to be produced in order to sustain life in the house, is matrifiliation, and that creates the balance. Because if the house is just there and it cannot produce to sustain life, then of course it's going to die. If those who are producing the life sustaining element don't have a house to put it and to live, it's not also going to be possible. So the patrifiliation and the matrifiliation systems are the main social organization of the Dagara. Pin P is to die. Pime is the plural for all the dead or unanimated things, because there is always the possibility that that which is unanimated today might become animate. Nobody knows.
Mm.
There is life in it, Now, if we think that there is no life, let's say, in a mineral, like, say, a rock or a salt, then why do we go looking for the salt and the other chemicals? We can break down all rocks. My father used to tell me that a man who is patient enough can cook stones to eat. So it's a matter of when you go to Iceland, for example, and you see the what volcanic eruptions have reshaped, you know, and the molting of the rock and all that. So you will say that the mountain is animate, it's living, there's life in it, and it can erupt at any time. So the two things that are important are the dead, those things that are not yet animate, and the animated, the Vobe beings. Uh, Bie is the plural, but here you can see that this word, for example, seeds, but it can also mean children.
Hmm.
So the seeds of plants, biena, but you always have to add what kind of seed it is. Come on, be the seeds for the corn, but bie, bie is also a child, and the plural will be this thing. The spirit of life. So you consider the Vube, the Vube here, which is life. What is it that give us like what? Let me explain this by this metaphor. During the initiation, for example, you are given a sort of Vurmir. It's like a rope. The spirit of life is like a which is going through every part of your body and every
Hmm.
part of the cosmos, and you don't have to touch it. It doesn't have to be concrete for you to realize it.
Hmm.
It is the it's tangible but also intangible. Intangible in the sense that you may not even be aware of its presence, but it is there. Tangible in the sense that you can feel it. You know that it disturbs you when it's not well in you. You know it.
Hmm.
Okay, and then death, pain. Pain is actually the spirit of the dead. In fact,
Hmm.
pain is to die. Pain, you are dead. Pain, once you've died, and then they have gone through all the ritual ceremony to make you an ancestor, and they capture your spirit into the statuette or the wooden figurine, which is to be kept in the house. Then those figurines are called the queen, but they also refer to all life spirits that are now back in the cosmos.
Hmm.
I hope, yeah. So you can use that term for the ancestors,
Hmm.
but here this is the singular you have put here, queen. The plural
Okay.
is female,
Okay.
with one eye. Okay,
All
and
right.
then you have the nature beings, Konton. The term is, yes, as I was explaining at the beginning, that we have this in order to relate with any spirit or with any deity or any divinity, you need to concretize it, to take it in the concrete form. So even the whole cosmos, you can create a certain, anytime you create a shrine in order to capture a particular spirit or a particular deity or a particular god, if you want to say that, you call it tir. That means you are capturing an aspect of the cosmos. The God, as we say, is anything that brings us closer to the understanding of the cosmos. Is a God.
Hmm.
You see, anything that goes beyond the ordinary human consciousness in order to get closer to a better understanding and relationship with the cosmos, we can call it a God, a deity, a divinity. See, and therefore you have this the earth as an institution. The earth institution is, in fact, the earth and the rain are also the most important political institutions. They give judgment. It's not human beings who give judgment. they give just they're standing also for justice for everything, and therefore you have the cult of the earth. So the village chief is under the earth, the cult of the earth,
Mhm.
and the one who is taking care of it is not his or her property. He's a custodian of either the earth or the rain. So if there is anything that happens, for example, any misdemeanor, you have to sanction according to what the earth wants. If you sanction the person over what the earth wants, then the wrath of the earth will come back to you.
Hmm.
You see, and then yeah, the bar is the it's a social organization, a ritual. I mean, more like a secret organization. It's very difficult to be a member of it. It takes you years,
Hmm.
and there you are trained. You are trained how to understand your cosmos, how to read your cosmos, your culture, how to deal with it, and uh, the first stage is a 1 year cycle. And the purpose of the bar is also a healing institution. So you don't just wait for people to get sick before you heal them.
Hmm.
You can foresee that certain people will be sick for certain reasons. So you already allow them to understand what sickness is, what life is, what weakness is, what riches is. And when they go through these initiation rituals, you already prevent the type of sickness that you think they will already get. For example, you've already all of a sudden got a situation where you are now in a very lucrative position. You are getting a lot of money.
Hmm.
That is a danger.
Hmm.
Riches is a danger just as poverty. So if you do not already fortify yourself against those destructive elements that riches entail, then of course you're going to get sick with the riches. You might become, you might even lose your sense of direction, your sense of purpose.
Hmm.
So the Barre institution already foresee that. So it gets every year they get a lot some initiates, some neophytes, and then they go through this whole year of uh, activities, ritual initiation activities, and at the end they are seen as the Bagli, the members of the society. But from that society, you can also then see where is actually your strength and your weakness. What profession can you follow? Are you really a farmer, or are you going to be a diviner, or are you going to be one kind of specialist? If you have to, so if you have a certain specialty, you are a specialist or something, you need to be able to manage it. So it is a society that not everybody is initiated into it, but in the former times, everybody was advised to get initiation. I had followed them for many years, and then some of the books I wrote, yeah.
Hmm. Uh, this kind of reminds me of two questions. And I should have asked this at the beginning
Yeah,
because the way that you're pronouncing is it bagger, bagger? How
bar,
do you pronounce? Say
bar.
it again.
The G is silent.
Oh, so it's bar.
You pronounce the G at the end, at the villa for at the villa at the back of your tongue. Bar.
Okay, bar. Okay,
Yeah,
so
correct,
it's
correct.
guttural.
Yes.
Alrighty. Um, I never asked if you knew
Yeah,
what the name Dagara means. Like, why is that the name of the people?
yeah, yeah. Actually, the first article I wrote was to talk about what is, I mean, how the names have come about. There are so many theories about how the Dagara came to get this name. Okay, uh, but in short, the meaning is da can be da. It can. There are those who think that they were sort of rebellious group among the chieftaincy group of Mamprose in the eastern part of Ghana, and they rebelled. Like say, if a cow is becoming rebellious, you say
Uh-huh.
gare, dagare. Those men who have rebelled.
Mm.
That is a sort of explanation that the people will give. So that door is man, but
Uh,
that is also a sort of market to buy. So the that here has a lot of meanings that you can add to it. Gara dagara. You can also say one of the important uh, uh, items, religious items, is what they call the foxes, which is actually representing the ancestors. They call it dachara. So a man is actually sometimes, eventually when he's dead, he called dachara. So the dagara could all just be a definition for man, for human being,
hmm.
because for them, every human being is dagara. That is how they will see it.
Uh,
Every, in fact, when you come to a language, anybody who doesn't speak clearly, you don't understand it. They will say the person is stammering. If you listen carefully, you'll be able to understand. So it doesn't matter which language the person is speaking.
hmm.
So it could also mean, but there are so many theories about that.
I
Okay,
see.
yeah, I've seen your foot. Yeah,
Yes, yes. I just went to the next slide.
yeah,
So I forgot the context of what the notes were for here, but I jotted this down. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, we have seen contour already, but okay, but the dolo
Yeah.
is actually it goes back to the matrifiliation and patrifiliation. So
Mm,
you define what perhaps you say your birth category as dolo. My my maternal birth group is my dolo. My mother gives me a certain identity
mm,
which I share with so many other people, and my father gives me a certain another identity. They are not opposing, but each is uh, complete and independent. Yet they go together to make the same one and complete independent person. That is one of
mm,
the things that I'm talking about. Even when you talk about Bill and Play, unborn and the rebirth, at live transmission, as I explained, you get something from your mother, which is complete. You don't get half,
mhm,
and you get something from your father, which is also complete. A complete ego, a complete, uh, and they come together, and they don't form half half. No, they form a completely different thing, which is also complete.
mm,
And it's that which is those ideas which are in this idea of fertility and fertilization. Fertilization is actually this process of having totally independent, two totally independent things without
mm,
which you take to form together. And what you take from your mother, it doesn't diminish your mother in any way. It's not
mm,
as if your mother has got some things and then he gives you and then he has less. No, you were there before your mother was even alive because
mhm.
you were the unborn. But those are then very philosophical things that we can go into. Yeah,
And you kind of mentioned these other two, but even what you just said, it kind of reminds me of the Akan,
yeah,
further south
correct.
in Ghana. Like they have that same principle.
Yes, they have the intro and then the sunsum
Yes.
and the busum. Yeah, correct. Yes, yes. I don't think it's something uniquely Dagara, but okay, we can
Mm.
go to that. Yeah,
Uh, so you kind of mentioned these,
okay, yeah,
already,
yeah.
but in the context. So
So you
uh,
can see that. So you can see that Sa here refers to the rain.
yeah.
So the principal occupant of the space above is rain, and Zu here is above the. So Tengzu is on the earth, on the space above, on the sky, on the Sazu. And that also can, anything you place above another thing is called Sazu,
Hmm.
and anything you place below something is called Tengzu.
Mm.
the above and the below. Yes.
Uh, Let me see. Three knowledge frameworks and thinking models that together constitute their movement. Uh, I don't know if you can see that, but on that other note, like I like to do a lot of comparative thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes, you come into your. I know you will. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, no. Okay. I don't know if you want me to talk about any of these.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I didn't know if you like covered, but again, I was just taking notes, and I just
Okay.
wanted to get your
Okay.
insight on what it is that I put on the screen.
Yeah, yeah. So perhaps the important thing I say is that, I mean, as I said, if I have to think within the Dagara concept, you know, when you say God, then it already has a certain connotation. But if you talk about framing the cosmos and the house and so the cosmos, the house is like the cosmos. I don't know if you have pictures of the Dagara house. It's really the one of the things that is still, even though they are changing things, but they are different in such a way the cosmos can be represented. And so when you go into a particular space, into a particular room, into a particular part of the house, you know that you are in this particular space. So for example, you have the terrace, and above the terrace, you can build a hut. And that's where the father stays. And that's where rain is, that's where the rain court is.
Hmm.
And then you have the rooms. And these rooms are divided into separate types of rooms. You have a particular pot for one particular room, for which is the kitchen. The woman may not never cook in that place, but it is the cosmic area for womanhood. You see, and
Hmm.
so everything that is there. And so when I say framing the cosmos, if you describe the house, the Dagara house, then you are more or less also describing some of the cosmic beings, some of the cosmic deities that are influencing their life.
I think the Dogon do the same thing as well.
Correct. Yes, yes. There's a lot that is in common with the Dogon. I mean, and the Lobi are the same as the Dagara. The Dogon, even and Bambara, those, yes. And if you see the architecture, they are very, very alike. The Batameliba and so there's a lot of similarity in the architecture itself. And that's what I'm saying, that you cannot understand the frame of mind without looking at the architecture and how they are built. Just as if you go to Egypt, and I mean ancient Egypt, yeah, we know that the different pyramids have expressed certain things, even though that is, yeah, we can see how, but we can come to that later on. Yeah,
Indeed.
yeah.
Um, so did you have anything else to say, or because
Well,
I know
perhaps
I need
it
to.
may be interesting when I say framing gender. What do I mean? I mean, there's of course anthropologists know that there's a lot of difference between gender and sex. You know, it's not because one is somebody has the phallus that is already necessarily a male, or somebody has a vagina that is necessarily female. But
Hmm.
in terms of the cosmic reading, it is, these are, you know, assigned positions and things that you have to do. So if, for example, you take, when you have to talk about the relationship between rain and earth, and it
Hmm.
is about fertilization, the fertility of the, then rain becomes the male and the earth becomes the female. But if you talk about their relationship in terms of production, the earth becomes the male and the rain becomes the female. You see, so
Hmm.
understanding this gender, how it is used in relationship to the spaces that we have and the objects that are there, you know, it's not because, let's say, you have a woman using an axe, that the axe necessarily becomes female. No, the axe is defined in a particular way, and she can use it, but then she uses it in a male way. A
Hmm.
man can use a pot. In fact, most ceramics are feminine. And when a man is using the ceramic, she knows that it is female. And she has to handle it in a particular way because in order to recognize its womanhood,
Hmm.
it's, the object itself will be treated as a living object with this personality. So just as how you treat the woman in the kitchen, you have to treat the objects, that particular pot, in the same way. And that's what I'm talking about here. Yeah,
All
I think
right.
that's okay. I think.
All righty.
Yeah,
Now, again, I deal with language,
yeah,
so and I'm just starting on this. I'm gathering some materials. Of course, you grew up speaking the
yeah.
Dagara language, but I have to go through dictionaries and linguistic works and
Okay.
just finding a few terms. I'm gonna do a more in-depth study
Yeah.
with the ancient Egyptian.
Okay.
And so I'll just put this up here for uh, folks later, but I'm just beginning this process of comparing words with the ancient Egyptian language, and I'm finding some meaningful correspondences, and I would have to find more, of
Okay.
course, before I can make any kind of relationship arguments.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like to do this first so that if I'm seeing any kind of correlations between two or more cultures,
Yeah.
that I can then ask the question, are these similarities due to chance or as a coincidence, or are these common traits that were inherited from a primordial ancestral culture and language? And that's what kind of the things that I do.
Okay.
And so, like, when you were talking about the ancient Egyptian,
Yeah.
not ancient Egyptian, but the Dagara,
Yeah.
concept of, saying the sky
Yeah.
and the earth and the cosmos, you see that very well
Correct.
depicted in the ancient Egyptian.
Yeah.
Now, of course, theirs is a little bit more elaborate in terms of physical drawings,
Yeah.
but here we see the goddess Nut,
Yeah.
that is the kind of the beyond the, when we start getting into the starry realm, as you can see the stars around her.
Yeah.
Then we have this entity here, Shu,
Yeah.
which is the space between
Yeah.
that layer of the heavens, and the earth. And then we have Geb
Yeah.
here, who is the earth. And it appears that Ting, earthland,
Yeah.
and Dagara is cognate with Ter,
Yeah.
earthland country in Egyptian.
Yeah.
And I have tentatively compared these two, but I think the zoo that you mentioned earlier in terms of space
Yeah.
actually fits the god Shu
Sure.
here. But it is what they're doing is just is what you said,
Yeah.
um concerning concretizing and deifying these particular principles to understand God
Yeah.
in relationship to the cosmos. We see the kind of the same approach
Yeah.
uh that you mentioned in um as far as the dagger is concerned.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting, and what you said is what I've argued for ancient Egypt
Yeah.
and in other parts of Africa. It's like this is common approach
Yeah. Yeah.
that I'm seeing. I think this is a Colton Blaine shrine.
Yeah. In Jano. Yeah, okay. Yeah. The contour. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
um
That's typical.
and
Yeah. You can see. Yeah. These are the small, and you can see the male and the female straight away. You can see
hmm,
the difference in the, and then, yeah. and therefore you can say they are often made of earth because that's what you do never talk about the contemporary when you talk about rain.
Hmm.
You talk about the rain as a personification. You use different objects, you use different art forms,
Hmm.
you know. And to come back even to your comparisons, okay, because for me as an anthropologist, what I'm interested in fact, in doing, not the that is the phonetic, but even when you look at the Egyptian hieroglyphics, like say when you talk about the way they present the god, or they
Hmm.
present the human image, the anthropomorphic forms. It will be interesting to compare even the way Africans today, when they are making, I mean, when they are representing, let's say, a deity anthropomorphically. You know, I read in Wikipedia recently, they will just say a god sitting. But if you look carefully from the African point of view, each of the gods is sitting differently. One
Hmm.
may be sitting on the left leg and then the knee raised. One is
Hmm.
sitting on both legs. Others are sitting, you know, or even the sort of mask they wear, you know, the headgear. So it's a falcon. It's all those things. All these are, in my view, metaphorically African forms of representations of the
Hmm.
day. And it is possible to draw these parallels as well and to combine them with the phonetics that you are working on. The
Hmm.
subtlety and to see the how, just even without, I mean, what is still there today, what you can still observe today in the way a min is you know, built, or
And you
a,
know they have a god Amen.
yes, men, yes,
Yeah.
they have, and that, and in my view, I think that is one of the oldest gods.
Mm, yes, exactly.
Yes, it's one of the first, and you can see that that one is also presented in a very crude form. The phallus is very, and all the contemporary that they talk about, you always make sure that the phallus is seen. You don't
Hmm.
hide it. The sex must be shown in most African cultural things. I mean, when it comes to the art, and those comparisons you can also make. Yes, okay, but that's yeah,
I also, well, yeah, this is, we mentioned this already,
yeah,
in terms of the breakdown
okay,
of those words, dealing with contemplate. And this is what you sent me uh, via email
okay, yeah,
concerning certain key terms.
yeah,
But there's, so what I had mentioned in the email
okay,
was the intone part,
mhm,
and how in the Akan it is used synonymously with Ntoro, which is it generally a word for spirit, but
yeah,
particularly among them, the spirit of the patrilineage.
yes, Abusum,
Uh, and so this word Ntoro or Ntro, it has cognates in other languages dealing with, some elevated to represent the power of God itself, and then some is just a word for spirit. But for neter in ancient Egyptian and the lugbada adro without the n prefix, tore amongst the Fa and Buti people, in the Congo, and then the Germanchi, Ntinu,
yeah,
and then it's Ntero and Nteru, God,
yeah.
um, et cetera, et cetera.
The
In
Dagara
these.
belong to this language group, the Gurma languages.
I'm
That's
sorry.
the Dagara, in a wider sense, the Grumache. That's where the Proto Dagara came from.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah, okay,
so um, I again, my first representation, or excuse me, introduction
yeah,
to the Dagara people comes from Malidoma
okay,
Some.
yeah,
And so, like, I wrote a blog
yeah,
many, 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 many years ago,
yeah,
uh, based on my initial readings of Some,
yeah,
asking could the contemple
yeah,
be the netures,
yeah,
of Burkina Faso.
uh-huh,
And the uh, I haven't come across this yet because I'm still in the chapter where you're really kind of discussing the contemplate.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh, but he describes them just as you said that they're small,
yeah,
and he's giving an example here of when he uh, met one of the contemplate, and he describes them as being a foot tall, with a kind of doll-like appearance
yeah, yeah,
in this book here, The Healing Wisdom of Africa. And
okay,
then he goes on to say that, like, what was captivating to me was the fact that I was dealing with a person smaller than me,
yeah,
yet older than me, with a long white beard,
yeah,
sitting on the wrong place at the wrong time, talking to me.
yeah,
So he's describing them, really short, 1 foot in height,
yeah,
with a long beard.
yeah,
And so in this first book of Water and the Spirit,
yeah,
he says the beard, talking about the contemplate, um, his beard was so long and white too, reaching almost to his chest, and he wore a traditional Dagara mantle, also white. So just kind of showing some traditional dress. This is actually some Senegalese brothers, but
yeah,
this is what I envision when he talks about here.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He goes on here saying approaching. So he's talking about the funeral of his grandfather in the book.
okay, yeah,
And so he says, approaching grandfather's pala from the north came a strange group of beings,
yeah,
short red creatures who looked like humans. They had pointed ears and were 2 feet tall at most,
yeah,
with genitals so long that they had to roll them around their necks, and hair so long it touched the ground. And so I'm not going to argue whether, what he's saying is true
yeah,
in the
yeah,
text. Is just I'm gonna take it at face value for the moment. So
yeah,
again, this hair long,
yeah,
short beings. So this is one of my old professors at the University of Houston. She
yeah,
wrote a book called The Pygmies Were Our Compass,
yeah,
Bantu and Batwa in the History of West Central Africa,
yeah,
early times. So now we're going down into Congo,
yeah,
basically. And they describe these short beings
yeah,
that they call Mimbo,
yeah,
right? And so what she says, I have highlighted or bolded here,
yeah,
one of 4 different miniature humanoid spirits ventured by the Ngbaka. The Mimbo are described as 30 centimeters in height and covered in fur with long hair that falls to their knees.
yeah,
They live exclusively in the forest, inhabiting trees and termite hills and moving about only at night.
okay,
Now, 30 centimeters, a foot is 30.48 centimeters,
yeah,
right? So you have, again, kind of hairy with long hair, 1 foot in height beings. So they're called something different
yeah,
amongst the pygmies. So she continues, physical descriptions of the Basimbi, another, and Kita nature spirits parallel those of Tachans, although they are sometimes reported as being white or pied in color with long hair. Um, Now, in this other book, Pygmy Kitabu,
yeah,
by Jean Pierre and Hallet, they describe these beings as well among the FA, and the FA are on in the Congo, but more so on the east coast of the Congo
okay,
forest. And so, they're talking about these beings. So he says, what place could this be? Fa said to himself. Then he heard someone cutting wood and went to investigate. Instead of a real person, he found the ghost of a sorceress in the shape of a hideous black dwarf. Her face was white. Her body was covered with scraggly black fur. She said to Ife, I know you. Have you come here because you are dead? The hero sat in the house helpless while she went to fetch her husband. He was the ghost of a sorcerer. He looked like his wife, except for his long white beard. And so we're seeing these descriptions: long hair, and the males had these long beards. Um, and so I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Anthony Ephraim Dancor,
Yeah, yeah,
also from Ghana.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So you know these beings I believe are equivalent to the contemplate. They call it motie
okay, yeah,
in his region of Ghana,
yeah,
and he's talking about them, and he says what distinguishes them, the most characteristic feature of these Ashanti little folk is their feet,
okay,
which point backwards. They are said to be about a foot in stature. And then he goes on and on to describe them
yeah,
there. And so when I looked at the hieroglyph
yeah,
for the nature, the in toro,
okay,
the inton, we kind of see the same type of description.
yeah,
You know, they never describe, at least in the records that I've been able to read, as far as ancient Egypt is concerned, the height of a nature.
oh,
But the sign, the hieroglyph for the nature,
yeah,
is a seated, man with that, you know, um, that kind of long garb,
right, yeah, yeah,
with the long beard and long hair.
yeah,
And so, uh, I was wondering. That was the reason for my questioning
yeah, okay,
concerning
yeah,
the intone, the cont and explaining the contemplate, to
yeah,
see if there was a connection in terms of the names
okay,
of the two. But it at least in appearance,
yeah,
there it's kind of the same representation,
yeah,
and kind of the same idea. And
okay,
so I'll just exit out of here and get back uh, to the main screen.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so, your book is, uh, in forcing me to ask some deeper questions,
yeah, yeah,
and it's giving me some comparative, some
okay,
stuff to do some serious comparisons with.
yeah,
And so that's why I had to contact you
okay.
and
The thing I was,
get some more insight.
yeah, the thing I
I'm
was
sorry. Go
saying,
ahead.
the comparison you're making, and then the what Marie Dome and the rest are talking about the appearance of these figure beings.
Mm-hmm.
We have to. I'm an anthropologist, so if I don't
Yeah.
see, I cannot describe it. So
Yeah.
I go into, but what I say is that on most of these cultures, these are once the description exists,
Mm-hmm.
somebody is when we are going through certain situations, we see them in our, I mean, as our image. I mean, as what they are translated. The content is is a translation of our thought form
Hmm.
into something concrete.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? And
Yes.
that's what artists do, and that's what precisely why I labeled the book "The Language of Art and Religion,"
Hmm.
because religion cannot go without the art.
Yeah.
You see, and all the religious objects, so all the religious objects are translated into a sort of uh, either in terms of performance, ritual acts,
Hmm.
aesthetic, and so on, or in terms of figurative graphics, so that we can relate with them, and they
Hmm.
become uh, real in the sense that these images become part of our life. We see them every day. So if you
Hmm.
go to a healer in Ghana, for example, and you enter the healing room, by all means, that person will have the figure of control.
Hmm.
And when you go further, you will see I have a picture of, let's say, the healer that I worked with, where he had this figure of the hippopotamus, which is a conton, with a conton blade on top. And the conton blade is riding backwards.
Hmm.
So that's an expression of what life is or what is happening when he's dealing with life as a healer.
mm,
And since art is part of it, part of our daily life, part of our daily life, when people say they see these things, of course, I believe them, but
mm,
I cannot immediately translate it in the form of the European concept of spirit, an inanimate, invisible object.
mm,
That is the problem. That is the problem of. In fact, I will always define that religion is language by itself, with a complete grammar and complete syntax, and one way of getting is not just only the phonetic but also the graphic expressions. And as you like the last thing you pointed out, I'm very much interested in going through all the Egyptian deities
mm,
and looking at them very carefully, and then writing how a diagramman will describe it.
mm,
You see, so this is, he will easily say, he will not say it's a god. He will say it's
mm.
a canton built sitting with the knees up.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
know the work of Robert Ferris Thompson,
yeah,
who does a lot of research on, African art.
yeah,
In his text, he would always remind us that, the artist would not carve
yeah.
in a wood or draw randomly.
No,
Like everything, every position of the hand,
yeah,
the size of the
correct.
feet,
Yeah,
the projection of the breast or whatnot, the jewelry that is wearing, like everything has a meaning and it's speaking a particular language.
yes,
So it's like I understand what you're saying when you're looking at even the Egyptian,
yeah,
why is this knee up,
yes,
in this hand, and why are the hands up like this, and
yes,
you know
yeah,
that what are they communicating,
correct.
with those gestures, and that's the kind of deep stuff that I want to learn,
Okay,
and one of the reasons why I like to study
yeah,
specifically West African and Central African
yeah,
uh cultures that still have that way of expressing an indigenous artistic language,
correct.
so that I can be, because it's different for us over here in the West
Yeah, yeah,
because of slavery has removed us,
yeah, yeah.
not totally
No,
100%, but enough that, we have to relearn, indigenous ways of thinking. So I study these cultures to kind of delve into the minds
yeah,
of our people so I can better understand,
yeah.
our ways of being and expressing. Um,
And
so
also, I would say that it's not. Don't take things for granted. Sometimes it's not just because one is born in an African that he can immediately understand the
mm,
artistic language or
yeah.
see. It has taken me many years in order
uh,
to finally start seeing these correlations. And when you begin to see them, then your, as the people will say, your eyes are open.
mm,
Our eyes are open to ordinary things, but when they are open for those things, even when you take some foreign culture, you'll
yeah.
be looking at it in a different way, trying to put different emphasis on certain things that you would never perhaps have seen if you didn't have this. That's why I call them frames of mind. But we have to develop it. We have uh, to to share it so that people see what it is. It's something that people can learn. It's not something so I don't take religion as something so mysterious that, or so extraterrestrial,
Mm.
that is not possible to grasp what is happening or what they say they mean. Yeah, I think
Have and I think you mentioned this earlier, talking about the difficulty in kind of translating, these African concepts,
yes,
into like English or at least an academic language.
yeah,
And, for me, I don't think it's like impossible, but to me it seems like you have to use more poetic language,
Mhm.
in order to do it.
Yeah.
Like, so, like, do you find it, very difficult to really, because the concepts seem real deep, but it at the same time it seems very simple, and and then trying to explain
Yeah.
the richness of it, but at the same time capture the simplicity,
Yeah.
seems like a challenge unto itself. So how do you grasp,
Yeah.
or how do you tackle that challenge, if it is a challenge even for you?
Especially when I thought that, I mean, let's say, okay, when you are writing a thesis or something, you want your promoter to understand,
Yeah.
or to relate it to works that have already been done before. And then so at that point, the academic jargon, the academic, rhetorics, in fact, for me, that was what was standing in my way when I was still a student or something. But when I began to say, okay, I'm going to write for myself or to myself, I'm going to speak to myself, but speak in English, then it becomes something else. Then you can sometimes, you know if it doesn't correspond to exactly what these guys are saying, then I try to describe it. You see, so you can see that in most of in the book, or in many books, you might find they mention God very few. Not that the concept is not present, but then I always realize if I say God, then people will immediately relate it to the concept of God that they have already. So it is so I will try to say, okay, the people didn't say God, they said Konton Min is God, okay, but the God of Konton. And if that becomes problematic, then put the two concepts together, how I've explained Konton and how I've explained Min, and then you get an idea of what I'm talking about. So even when I say nature spirit, it still diminishes what the people want to say about Konton, because the spirit is in nature, but it is humans who have seen that spirit in some way and have modeled it according to their understanding of it. So the Akan have seen that in Obosom, which is, in fact, if you go back into your linguistic correlation, so you only see that the first part, the in, is like I or something like that. In talk, my kind, I'm a human being, but the animals are like me, the gods are like me, the spirits are like me. So it might the falcon is a spirit, half human, half man, or something in those sort of. So in talk, contour, something else which is like me, which has the same. We share this cosmic spirit vitality, as you say. At the base of it, we are all out of that cosmos, all of that nature. That is the. So I deal. I don't. These days I don't actually think about it. I just
Yeah.
say, I think I'm old enough to to have the reviews that says, what are you talking about? Or I'm not disappointed that somebody say I don't just understand what you're talking about. Even not only just Europeans, my fellow Dagara people say no, but you are not writing a Dagara. You are writing philosophy. So I've had reactions from Dagara people themselves who are priests or who are religious, and they tell me no, but this is what are you talking about? And I say, look at the language. Look at it when you say contour. Okay, just don't stay there. Go up, go down, go laterally, both up and down, and then and see which are the words that go together, and then you get a different concept. Then okay, then they begin to say okay. So it's a frame. That's what I'm saying. My whole chapter was on the frame of thought, the way of reasoning. That is important to pick up.
Indeed. And it seems like as I've come to understand it over the years, that when um, and it's kind of hard to find the words. So like when it really boils down to it, the Africans have a very scientific understanding of the cosmos. It's just that, especially when you're coming from, societies that did not have writing per se, that the way to transmit this information from generation to generation, Africans have a unique pedagogy, which includes the personification
Correct.
of these principles.
Yeah.
And, the more and more that I read and study, and I study the language, and then I get an opportunity to engage with certain priests, or what we call priests, or just elders, in the traditions, they don't have this kind of Western frame that these are gods and goddesses that people are worshiping or whatnot. It's just that for the lay public, they had to personify
Correct.
and create stories in a way that allows for them to grasp it,
Yeah.
and then utilize it in some way in their lives. And to an extent, it's even like that in the West,
Yeah. Sure.
because everybody can't understand mathematical language,
Yeah.
you know and to deal with mathematics, there's certain things you see if you're a mathematician that doesn't have really a real world equivalent, so to speak.
Yeah.
But for those priests, who understand the language and what it references, it's as concrete as anything else. But when they have to explain it uh, to the layperson, then they have to borrow language. So, for example, when you get into quantum field theory, right? They say that there's really no fundamental element,
Yeah.
right? That there is only fields,
Correct.
in which there's an excitation in the field, and then that excitation of the field becomes a particle. So when you talk about like a particle of light
Yeah.
or whatnot, it's just an excitation or agitation of the electromagnetic field.
Correct.
But there's really no way to describe. That's why we have to use the word field
Yeah.
in plain. And what they'll say is like it's like an ocean, like a liquidy,
Yeah.
uh, like cosmic ocean from which these particles arise.
Yeah.
Well, you see the same language literally in ancient Egypt when they're talking about the primordial ocean
Ocean. Yeah.
and the quote unquote deities,
Yes.
arise out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, all throughout your text, you're even speaking about it in terms of scientific language,
Yeah.
whatnot. So, for me at least, I'm finding these
Okay.
correlations
Yeah. Yeah.
and things. So I really do appreciate
Yeah.
the work you've done, and I plan on getting some more of your work. And speaking of,
Yeah.
what are some of the other books that you've written, and what are the focus on that? If you can at least give us
Okay.
two others.
Yes, there are two I mentioned in the cover of that book, which are on the bagr initiation, and
Mm-hmm.
so the the most once you become a senior initiate, part of the initiation of the senior graduates, I say after you have gone through the first stage, is to then what they call teach you the mythology, the myth of creation, the myth of being, and these are done in a sort of secret locations at night. So you might have the whole night the specialists come in and he's having this musical instrument. And when they begin the thing, so he's reciting the text, more like I saw in some Indian culture. So that he's reciting a text from beginning to end. And one of the books I did was to have the opportunity to have, because of my position and then the fact that I'm qualified to be part of it,
Hmm.
I was able to record this mythology. So there are two types. You have the white bar and then the black bar, to the recitations. And
Hmm.
I've written two books on the text itself,
Hmm.
and given the language in the Dagara and then in the English. And there you will see that the problem of translation is there.
Hmm.
So and what is amazing, for example, the black bar, it lasted the recitation lasted more than 4 hours, and the person never made any mistake.
Hmm.
So it makes you wonder what is the pedagogy, as you say, the pedagogy of this transmission of African knowledge. We cannot look for it alone in the script, in the this type of linear script that we have come to adapt.
Hmm.
We have to look for it in other ways. And
Hmm.
a situation like this, when I translate and I even put it, to make sure that I'm not, I do not suffer the fate of many African scholars of being dismissed. I'm
Hmm.
just creating things. I said, okay, this. We now have the technology. This is a recording. And therefore, it's now in British Library, the whole recording,
Hmm.
3 4 hours, and I've translated. And if you don't believe what you think, go and we listen. Get a language experts, and we can listen in the Dagara, and you see if line by line I make any mistake, then you can take me on. So those were the primary, because I want to get to the point, a certain point where I can make these uh, universal statements about African culture. I couldn't
Hmm.
have done it without the proper groundwork. So for
Hmm.
me, I saw my first my thesis and these other books as a groundwork for something that I can now start talking about, making relationship, let's say even to Egypt, to other, I say, look, this is African, and this is the frame of mind of African. So this latest work was actually to say, look, let us go back to the frame of work. Just even another example, because one of the most problem was already saying that with the oral cultures, you cannot document them in such a way that you take a distance and then look at it. No, that's not totally true. You know,
Hmm.
most of the rituals that we do, there's a funeral ritual.
Hmm.
When the cow, for example, is offered in the Dagara funeral, the cow is not there because of the meat.
Hmm.
Nobody has gone there to eat meat. The cow is there to think with,
Hmm.
and every part of the cow has symbolic, I mean, meaning, both syntactically and symbolically.
Hmm.
And if you have more of this, and then explain step by step, when did they put the cow? How did they tie the cow? How have they
Hmm.
killed the cow? What part of the cow goes to what? All this, and the people know them.
Hmm.
You see, so there are some anthropologists who say that animals for sacrifice are not there to eat; they are there to think about and to think with.
Hmm.
And when you have those sort of things, then it can take you 2,000 years, but if people continue to do it, they will do it in a proper way, and you can recreate what ancient Egypt. It's not that difficult, I think, looking at even the pantheon, the beer pantheon, and the different types, to create a certain narrative that is typically African. Don't even have, and you don't even have to do DNA test to find out whether whether it was, no. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Just studying the language
yeah,
itself,
yes,
it tells me off
yeah,
the bat that these are African people, and they come from the same lineage as certain people in West Africa, certain people in Central and East Africa. It's just part of this this unifying underlying cultural unity
Yeah.
that is present. And so, of course, Africa is not monolithic.
No.
Everyone's not the same, but there's enough commonalities that you can almost use one culture as a framework for to try to better understand what was going on in ancient Egypt. Um, and so that's exactly what I do in my work. But yeah, we've been going for 2 hours now, and I don't want to hold you. And so uh, as I mentioned earlier, our guest is in Belgium. Um, so they're I think 6 hours ahead of New York. Um,
There's something wrong with your sound system. Can you check it?
um,
No, no, there's interruption. It's no longer
am
working.
I echoing or something?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, now it's okay.
I hear it. Okay. Um, I'm trying to see if there's. Well, no, I don't hear it anymore.
I can't hear you
Okay.
now.
You can't hear me now? Okay. I can hear you. Uh, testing, testing. Let me see. Um, Let me just make sure. Um,
Can you hear me?
yes.
But I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Uh, okay.
Okay.
For those who are listening live in the chat in YouTube and on Facebook, if you can hear me, please acknowledge in the chat that you can hear me. Um, Let me see. Testing, testing.
Okay, okay. Now it's okay.
On your, because I see you're in here twice.
Okay, yeah. There's something went wrong with the laptop, and then I reset it.
Okay, so but on your laptop you can hear me
Yes,
well.
I can
Okay,
hear. Yeah.
okay. No problem, no problem. Uh, Alrighty. So they're saying it's fine on their end.
Okay, yeah.
So, but yes, I just wanted to, wish we can go on, for a very long time. So I have to, if you don't mind, coming back
Yeah.
on the program sometime in the future, especially when I've had more time to read
Okay.
that text and we can, get into some specifics. But the Dagara people are uh, a very interesting people,
Yeah.
and I think are worthy of study and understanding,
Okay.
um, especially for us over here in the West.
Correct.
And I think the literature coming out of that area is really insightful in
Yeah.
terms of kind of understanding an indigenous African worldview,
Yeah.
even in the context of, and I guess I can ask you this, with the advent of Christianity,
Yeah.
hitting, and I don't know to what degree, if any, is Islam penetrated those areas, but how has that impacted
Yeah.
the 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 culture and the frame of thought,
Yeah.
for the Dagara people?
Yeah. Um, they found Islam actually incompatible. It's just impossible, even up to now, today, for the Dagara. If you convert into Islam, you more or less lose something of your ethnic identity. There is a neighboring town, Wa. So all those who get converted to Islam more or less call themselves Wala.
Hmm.
because the traditional Islam, as it was passed to us in the West African context, was quite insistent on purity,
Hmm.
and the traditional religion couldn't. That, that's why sometimes they say that they are wild people. I mean, they are not conforming. They are not conforming to other things.
Hmm.
In the Judeo-Christian, recently the first missionary came to the Dagara land in around 1929.
Hmm.
There has been a lot of conversion. In fact, most of the people are converted, but the conversion was massive. It wasn't
Hmm.
piecemeal. So between 1929 and 1960, they already had enough priests and a bishop for them to have their own, more or less, church and participated in Vatican II. You know what I'm talking about. So
Hmm.
the missionaries were forced, more or less, to adapt most of the cultural items that you went to Sunday mass, but the traditional religion in that place hasn't been eradicated as happened in other parts of Africa. That is why you're having these interesting
Hmm.
insights coming out. There is now Christianity, Catholicism in particular, present,
Hmm.
but they don't see it as a contradiction to the practice of their traditional religion, especially when it comes to healing.
Hmm.
There are the clergy who are mostly not happy, I mean, fighting a certain battle, but the healers continue to exist. And uh, I think that with what is happening now, there's going to be some internal revolution going on. People are even going back deeper again into the traditional system to
Hmm.
understand more and to. But but Islam is not, has no
Hmm.
impact.
All right.
Yeah, Islam
Now,
has.
I wonder, um, and I should frame this. And I, okay, there's a scholar by the name of Dr. Kaikosa Kajangu,
Hmm.
who is from, I believe, Malawi.
Okay,
He currently lives in the United States,
okay,
and he's written a couple of books, but they're primarily dealing with poetry.
yeah,
But the way to he calls them wisdom poetry,
yeah,
and the the poetry is basically just taking a number of proverbs from across the continent
okay,
and weaving them together
yeah,
to make, a type of poem. So that's something that he's, in his own wisdom,
right,
learning and understanding African traditions as a whole.
yeah,
That's something that he has kind of created, and is kind of expanding, in other places. But one of the things that he brought about, um, in his work, was this concept called the African superhighway of wisdom.
okay,
And so instead of secret societies,
yeah,
he uses the phrase wisdom tradition,
okay,
you know, and or wisdom centers, or centers of wisdom.
yeah,
And he talks about how, just like as you said, how the artwork is central,
yeah,
to the language,
yeah,
of these wisdom centers. So instead of the religion, it's
yeah,
wisdom traditions,
yeah,
so that's kind of language he uses.
yeah,
But he talks about what he calls the African superhighway of wisdom,
yeah,
and that is the the notion and the idea that African people would travel long distances
yeah, yeah,
and get initiated
yeah,
into other people's traditions,
yeah,
and would bring back
right,
what they've learned,
yeah,
and if possible would synthesize, some of that information. And he himself has traveled and been initiated in a number of African systems from West Africa,
yeah,
excuse me, from mainly in Central Africa and South Africa. So his own wisdom tradition in
yeah,
Malawi,
yeah,
to the Zulu tradition in South Africa,
yeah,
and the Luba tradition in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
yeah,
And so when I read this, I started looking for evidence of this in other, living traditions.
yeah,
And so I remember a gentleman by the name of Apetu, who I forgot what group he belongs to,
okay,
but it's in northern Ghana
okay,
that his people,
yeah,
were. And so he was on a radio program some years ago.
yeah,
There was a brother, he's now deceased,
okay,
who, an African American man,
yeah,
who went to Ghana,
yes,
on a trip, and then found himself in northern Ghana,
yeah,
and kind of fell in love with the people there,
okay,
and built a relationship with the elders and stuff there, then initially got initiated
okay, yeah,
into it. And so over time, he would help other African Americans come
yeah,
and learn. And so one of his elders was named Apetu.
okay,
And so he would call northern Ghana, and they would be on a show kind of like how we are now,
yeah,
and they would be kind of explaining some things. So he was talking about him being initiated in Senegal
okay,
also, and then going into Benin, in Nigeria, and also getting initiated. And so I'm being long-winded,
great,
to set the frame for my question
yeah,
is, to it, amongst the Dagara,
yeah,
is there a tradition where like certain people would travel and get initiated into these other wisdom traditions
correct,
and wisdom centers and bring that information back? So like we always talk about the synchronization of African religions and
okay,
Christianity and Islam,
yeah,
but not much conversation about inter-African
correct,
synchronization. So I just wanted to know if there was, such a thing that you come across in your work or just experience,
yeah,
if that is a reality among the Dagara people.
yeah, and that's where the figure of control comes back into almost all the African tradition, the nature spirit. So
Mm-hmm.
because it is, even though most of these institutions are linked to the family ancestors and so on, your ancestor. If you, like say, if you come, I take my friend to my house, the first thing they would like to establish is his identity, to fit him into Dagara context,
Mm-hmm.
and then the matri identity, as I explained. Now, once those have been identified, this notion that all Dagara or all humans stayed in one house comes into play.
Hmm.
So, if it is the case that you need to be initiated, that means that your control spirit, the spirit that is in you, will show that this guy has come here not just for visit, but something. He keeps on asking things, and that's my case as well. Because I grew up, I was done my doctorate, and then my father was impossible. He could not believe it that when I said I was going to get initiated into this society, he said we have no idea even where to start.
Hmm.
I've done it, but we have no idea where to. So I had to go back to people who do it, and I said, "This is who I am." And then they tell
Hmm.
me, "Okay, if you are like this, then you should belong to this community."
Hmm.
So most African societies have this, as I even wrote in my head, this open notion of family, notion of identity, whereby they can easily incorporate.
Hmm.
And kinship is not based on blood.
Hmm.
is based on the manifestation of one's spirit, of one's lifestyle, of one's, and once you are able, even if you don't know it. For example, when you come to a totemic structure, I will give you a personal example.
Hmm.
When I took my wife to the house for the first time, it took my father less than 2 minutes to assign her with a particular matrifiliation and a patrifiliation, and that has stuck.
Hmm.
So she participates in this, in that, and that. And if it within her life she needs to be initiated, she will be initiated. And then talking about knowledge transfer or knowledge centers, yes. For example, one of the things that required in Bar, there it's said that if you become a master of Bar, if you are initiated, let's say even in Ghana, northern Ghana, and you go to a different society where they have it, you are a master. You don't have to be initiated there again,
Hmm.
and you are allowed to participate. You
Hmm.
see, so it doesn't matter where you are initiated. But if it is a knowledge center, it's something like the power for wisdom. Once you say you are initiated, that's it. You come to Ghana, you say you have been initiated into this type of, and they check to say, okay, this is the same as BAR. Then you are a BAR member.
Hmm.
You see, so
Yeah.
it is, and these are all the areas that have, as I say, have not yet been explored because we have not yet constructed the framework, the thinking framework to bring all these things together. Because we'll say he's doing poetry, therefore he doesn't know much about spirituality or religion. No,
Hmm.
or he's doing oral literature, so it is not. I'm not doing religion, but that is the point because these categories of discipline of breaking down knowledge into these can be a factor that is making it difficult to integrate the different systems and look at them in different ways. Yeah, it's possible.
It reminds me of there's another scholar. He has passed away. He's an ancestor, but Jordan Ingobani.
Okay.
He was a Zulu from the Amazulu people in South Africa,
Yeah.
and he wrote a book titled "Conflict of Minds."
Okay.
Right, and the framework of the text is he's giving an explanation of why there is constant conflict between the African and the European.
Yeah.
And he frames it as the conflict of minds.
Yeah.
And so he starts off first and foremost with the different sense of cosmologies.
Yeah.
And he said to understand the people, you got to understand their relationship,
Yeah.
their the inner logic of their relationship to the cosmos
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And then when he talks about, he talks about the African in general, but of course he's speaking primarily from the Zulu tradition.
Yeah.
So he's like, the African, which he calls the Sudic, like
Yeah.
for Sudan,
Yeah.
the Sudic ideal, there's a bias
Yeah.
for synthesis,
Yeah.
whereas the European, they have a bias for fragmentation
Yes.
and separation.
Yeah.
And this is part of the conflict,
That's yeah.
you know. And what you said kind of reminds me of that discussion that he was having in that text.
And
Uh,
we have built it into the scientific method to such a degree that if you want to synthesize, then they'll say it's not science.
exactly.
You see, you have to break it down so that you can look at it. And as you said in dynamics, when you break it down, then you don't see anything, and then you come back and you can put it back,
Yeah.
and you don't understand how you broke it down. you know, that is exactly correct, and that's one of my things. I say the frame of mind is how do you have a method that links up the art in it, the language in it, the spirituality in it, and the profane. What does profane mean? Profane is part of life, So it is only this idea of good and bad. It doesn't necessarily make sense. It is what is good can those are the things that really make but I think also that we should, even within the European tradition, last time I went on a holiday with my family to Iceland, and
Hmm.
I went to visit the what they call the Museum of Sorcery. Of course, nobody
Hmm.
knows that is a Museum of Sorcery in Iceland, but
Hmm.
it's small village, and you can see that yes, those sort of traditional knowledge continue to exist even in traditional European cultures.
Hmm.
You know,
I tell people that all the time. Like when there's some earlier stuff that I studied, and if you look at early Indo-European
yeah,
religion and culture,
yeah,
they worship nature,
yeah.
and
It's
had
yeah,
harvest festivals, and
yeah.
you know uh
And when
it's very much.
get people and you are talking, and then you can see the common language of religion,
Hmm.
and that's what I'm talking about. I'm thinking about here, that there is a common language which, if you get it, you talk about religion, not about ideology. Then it's
Hmm.
which Christianity had become since the time of Constantine. As I might say, I mean, when I look at European culture, I always go back to the 300 AD,
Hmm.
making the distinction between Christianity as an ideology as soon as it became the religion of the emperor Constantine,
Hmm.
and Christianity before that, which was not, which had nothing to do with Christendom. You know, we have to always constantly think about these things when we are talking, and then say, well, okay, we understand how they have got to where how we have got to where we are, but then we don't have to stay there.
Indeed, indeed. I'm gonna make a quick announcement, and then I'm let you have the last word.
Okay,
But for those of you who are watching, today we do have another interview at 5 p.m. Eastern Time uh, with Dr. Ifitayo Flannery, who's an Africologist and psychologist out of, well, she currently teaches at San Francisco State University, but she is originally out of New Orleans and Atlanta, Georgia. Went to Temple University and now is teaching on the West Coast. So it'll be 2 p.m. for those of you on the West Coast. And so if y'all can join us, we will have a conversation about her work and research and insights into the issues and problems of today. And so that is going to be 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so I hope to see you then. Um, and so again, I'd like to thank you for joining this program. It has been very, very insightful. So I know I'm just going to say right now, everybody who's listening, you're going to have to go back and listen again and take some notes. And if you can, I encourage you to get his book of life and health. Um, that came out in 2019. It is an excellent read, and I'm currently reading it as we speak, and gathering much information. And I know I'm going to have to reread those chapters, and so I can fully grasp what is being said. But I want to give you the opportunity to uh, any last words and anything that you wanted to say that we haven't covered, whatever's on your heart uh to say.
yeah. Well, since you first contacted me, I've been looking at your website and your work, and I want to congratulate you very much for the work you are doing. It's really, and you have given me new perspectives as well,
Oh,
because
I
I
appreciate it.
about Egyptian language or gods and anything. But the more I look at it, I say, okay, there is something. I'm looking for ways to expand. Perhaps that is the
Mm,
way. That is an entry
mm,
point, and
mm,
I'm sure that I will be asking for your advice and
mm,
review when I come to the Egyptian side of things. and then sending you other things. For the others, well, I'm always available. I mean, I'm a teacher by profession. I
Hmm.
like to have any, I mean, communicate what I know and then discuss with people and get to know more. So if people are interested in any academic dialogue at any time, I'm always available. They can get to me through my website or through the research gate or
And that's right. I want to share
yeah. So they can
this website. So let me put it in the, let me make a banner real quick. Create a banner.
but most of the things
Uh,
are in the research gate if people want to, if people have access to those.
uh, boom. Put scroll at the bottom. Well, I'll just add banner and then boom. So you can reach the website he's talking about, at least I believe, is the tangancollection.net.
Yeah,
If there's another one, I could put that up there for them to see as well.
yeah, the
But
research is good. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
If the most of the things that if they want to read more, the research gate gets more material. Here, I don't put up material as such for articles or other things.
Okay, but this is the website that they can go and contact you.
Contact me. Yeah, I think that.
Okay,
Yeah,
no problem, no problem. I'll just leave that up for the moment. But yes, thank you
okay,
once again for. Let me see. I will put this comment up. Uh, well, I don't think it'll let me put the banner and that up at the same time. Well, I guess it will. So, Yoli Ngadali, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, says, "Thank you, Dr. Tengan. I will read your books. Your work is very inspiring to me." And so, yes, this has been a very inspirational and insightful conversation.
yeah,
And so I thank you once again.
problem.
And we, again, will be back later, as I mentioned. Um, Make sure you go to this website and check it out. There's a lot of good information on there. And if you can, get his books. I'm currently reading one, and I highly recommend them to you all. So I appreciate you coming on,
Okay,
and I hope to have you on again sometime in the near future.
okay,
And so we appreciate you greatly.
okay. Thanks very much.
All righty,
Okay,
go ahead.
so
All right, I'll just put the banner up. I usually end it with some music,
okay,
so uh, this will be a good time. So I'll just go with my usual track, and we'll go from there. Thank y'all for listening. See you later. Oh, and like and share and subscribe to the channel. And thanks to all of those who have contributed to the um financially to the channel. If you want more guests like this to come on, please keep supporting. And I will see y'all later. Thank you all.